We're all still struggling with pandemic regulations, and over these last several months, many Americans have certainly endured real hardships. Businesses have been forced to close, and people have lost loved ones. There are some aspects of the pandemic, though, that aren't really much more than inconveniences. And so, in the midst of these problems, we come to Memorial Day, a day when it's appropriate to remember that many Americans have endured much more than inconveniences. And why did they do it? Because there was a need, and they loved their country enough to meet it. It's a day when we should remember the soldiers of the Continental Army who served under George Washington before we even had a country of our own. To give just one example, during a 6-month encampment at Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, thousands of men were declared unfit for duty because of problems with exposure. They lacked basic cold weather protection and had no boots. All of the soldiers at Valley Forge survived on extremely limited rations, and Washington lost about a third of his men to influenza, typhoid, and dysentery. Many of the same problems persisted through the 19th century, and when the First World War erupted in the 20th century, men and women in uniform faced even more challenges. The mass production of more powerful explosives led to a war that was defined by artillery, and soldiers had to deal with the exhaustion and sleep deprivation that came with the constant shelling. The trenches used during the war were plagued with vermin and disease, and soldiers developed a variety of problems related to the cold and damp environment. In World War II, the Pacific Theater introduced all of the challenges of jungle warfare with its heat and disease. The European theater forced American forces to once again fight and survive in temperatures below the freezing mark. The Second World War demanded sacrifices from those still in the United States as well. Many commodities were in short supply, and others were simply unavailable as resources were devoted to the war effort. When forces went to Korea, they faced difficult terrain and unpredictable weather. Some fighting in Korea took place with temperatures dropping to 36 degrees below zero. Combat in Vietnam sent American forces back into jungle warfare and introduced the psychological hardships of combat with no clear offensive front. Action during Vietnam also introduced service members to a heavily regulated form of conflict, which was often unpopular with Americans viewing the action on their televisions back home. For those who served in Iraq and Afghanistan, the reports are much the same. In spite of advances in military technology, American service members still faced the desert environment and the constant stress of facing an enemy that was often impossible to recognize. Medicine has made enormous advances too, but service members from our most recent conflicts still face health challenges related to their service. And of course, all service members have to bear the burden of separation from their loved ones, separation from their homes, separation from their aspirations that don't involve armed conflict or national defense. Those service members involved in combat also face the obvious hardship of losing their lives. And that brings us to Memorial Day, a day we set aside to reflect on those who lost their lives taking on hardships that most of us have difficulty imagining. Of course, we haven't begun to describe what American service members have done. No matter how many words we use, they never seem up to the task. So let's do what our service members have done and put the emphasis on action, not words. As we face our own challenges, let's make every day an occasion to remember how they faced adversity and overcame it.